This is Brian Gibbons. We're talking about agreement for deed or contract for deed. It's a great way to buy without credit, rating, or a lot of cash. So what is an agreement for deed? It's basically seller financing, where the seller gives the buyer the deed to the property after the buyer is paid for the property through monthly installments. Now, some agreements state that the seller will convey the deed and convert it to outright seller financing once the buyer has made a certain number of payments as agreed. Now, how do I buy under an agreement for deed? Well, if you're looking to buy a home or an investment property by putting little or no money down and without qualifying, agreement for deeds are a great way to do it. It's fairly easy to get a motivated seller to do an agreement for deed, even if the seller is concerned about their credit or concerned about the due on sale clause. The seller can feel more in control with the fact that the deed has not transferred yet. This is important to some sellers who are concerned about you not following through with your side of the agreement. As a buyer, it's important to know that many banks will allow you to refinance a contract for deed agreement as if you have a regular seller finance mortgage. Now, this can be very helpful if you need time to build up your credit rating and want to get into a home now without needing a large down payment. And with a refinance loan, you don't put money down like you would on a regular, normal purchase loan. And this means you could purchase the property under an agreement for deed from the seller using no money down, and then later refinance the agreement for deed and pay the seller off. As part of the refinance, you can also roll in the closing costs into the loan and not only close using no money, but it's possible you could actually walk away from closing with money in your pocket. Now, I want to talk about don't sell on an agreement for deed. If you already own a property and you want to sell it creatively, an agreement for deed is not your best choice. Mainly because agreement for deeds are so much like a seller carryback held mortgage that you actually have to foreclose on a buyer if the buyer does not pay you. In some states, foreclosures can be done fairly quickly, so it may not be so much of a factor, depending on what state you live in. Now, the types of properties to invest in, any property you feel is a good investment is a good candidate if the seller is flexible enough. However, as a general rule, agreement for deeds are only used by investors for buying rental property or on an occasional retail deal. These properties are almost always nice homes in nice areas, needing only minor cosmetic work, if the home needs any work at all. As a home buyer, if you can find a seller who is motivated or flexible enough, you can purchase virtually any house that you wish. So the advantages of an agreement for deed: 1, you don't have to qualify. As for the advantages of using agreement for deeds when buying, it is basically a seller-held mortgage, except that you get the title a little bit later. Because it is seller financing, you don't have to qualify like you would with a regular bank loan, nor would you have to put any money down if you found the right motivated seller. Little or no money required. In addition to possibly not having to put any money down, there are no upfront closing costs. You'll be paying those costs later when you fulfill the terms of the agreement and you take title. You can also refinance the agreement. Most banks recognize an agreement for deed as being seller financing agreement and will allow you to refinance as if you had a regular mortgage with the seller. Because of this, agreement for deed can be a very helpful stepping stone on getting a bank loan without having to come out of pocket for down payment or closing costs. Now, the disadvantages of an agreement for deed, the due on sale clause. First of all, an agreement for deed does still violate most due on sale clauses, even though most people may not realize it. However, many sellers are still willing to do them because they feel that a bank will not call the loan due if the title hasn't transferred and the payments on the loan are being made. Sellers may have to foreclose. If you are the seller under an agreement for deed, one of the disadvantages is that you must always have to foreclose on the buyer in the event the buyer defaults. This is mainly due to the fact that an agreement for deed is considered an installment sale, which is basically a mortgage. The seller also couldn't just evict the buyer as if they were a tenant, and there's no lease involved. As a buyer, you don't always want to counsel the seller on what would have to be done in event that you defaulted. After all, you as the buyer are supposed to follow through on the agreement and not default, so the seller might wonder why you would be disclosing this. Also, every seller can seek legal counsel if they want to. You will, however, want to let the seller know that an agreement for deed does give rise to the due on sale clause. At the same time, you will want to explain to them that it's highly unlikely that any bank would call a loan due when the title hasn't transferred and the payments on the loan are being made. If the seller is reluctant to do the deal because of the due on sale clause, then you'll want to offer them a lease with option instead. This ends the overview of an agreement for deed. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time.